Mm. Okay, I have thoughts on my head that I'll try to express. Um, in a sense, I could just go in any direction. I could talk about anything I want. Um, so I will. I'll try to do that. I I guess there are some experiences that have been on my head since yesterday. I had this experience yesterday that, well, projection, the concept of projection started making a little more sense to me in some way. I wanted to try and speak about that. So, uh, I've always felt like projection gets more intense at certain times and less intense at others, you could say. So there will be moments where you're walking down the street and you're projecting all sorts of things onto people. So it'll seem as if that person on the street is, looking at you or angry with you or happy with you or desiring you or whatever, right? Uh, you can get into these big states of paranoia where everything around you has meaning, more meaning than usual, at least socially, social meaning. It seems as if everyone's interacting with everyone else all the time. And obviously, that's, again, that's sort of one of the, like, starting points for paranoia and things like that. So there's that. And then there's moments when that is just not happening so much. I'm feeling better. I'm feeling more calm. I'm feeling more sort of less stressed, basically, less, more relaxed. And I don't assume that so much, or I don't sort of believe my own intuitions so much. So maybe I have this little intuition that someone's body language on the street could represent them being frustrated with me for walking so slowly or whatever. Uh, but suddenly that intuition is seen as purely an intuition. You realize that it has nothing to do with the person in front of you. Like the person in front of you, it is not. You don't get that strong emotional sense that you're right in your intuition. You realize more clearly that the world beyond you is outside of your intuition. You can't really fully know what other people are thinking, and you realize more clearly the little tricks you play to assume things in a certain way, to say, yes, that person's eyes and body language mean this, or whatever. So anyway, so I realized that the capacity for projecting stuff kind of rises and falls in some way. Uh, and, whoa, okay. Touching stuff while I'm making a video. How do I... Damn it. Now that's jammed. Okay. Okay. Projection. Projection. And then the thing I guess that I sort of realized is that you can be projecting stuff onto people. Right, okay, yeah. See, that you can project stuff onto people that is not even representative of people. Like, you can project pure um, emotion onto people, pure emotion. And people can represent emotions, specific emotions. Now, what do I mean by this? Like, the experience I had is that I realized that I've been feeling lately as if a lot of emotions are sort of coming back up, things that I wasn't allowing myself to feel, and so on. And so the way that I've been experiencing this is literally as visually, in a sense, right? Emotions, or spatially, emotions literally moving up, coming up, kind of thing, and coming towards you. Emotions sort of coming towards you, and you allowing them to come to you. And you realize that there's a sort of ego defense mechanism that says, no, I don't want that. I don't want this emotion near me. I don't want this emotion to come near me. And you can notice yourself sort of like defending yourself, protecting yourself against an emotion that is arriving. And then you can also tell that if you allow yourself to sort of let it come somehow, and it's not, again, it's not easy because it's not ego. The ego can't fully decide to do that, but if it happens through other practices, then the emotion comes. And once it is felt and you realize what it is that you're feeling and you allow yourself to feel it, things improve. Things really just improve. Anyway, so I'd been feeling this sense of like, things coming towards me, but in my inner world, let's say, right? In a sense, just a sort of a, combination of bodily sensations and thought, psychic kind of events. But then in the street, the same kind of stuff was happening, which is that I could tell that the type of projections I was having towards people were more or less the same, consistently. So this is something I've experienced in other occasions too, that I will always sort of I'll realize that there is a trend in my projections, and that already kind of alerts me to the fact that there is something going on that is projective in its quality, because you realize that if there are days when you're feeling particularly like afraid and vulnerable, you might project anger onto everyone. So it will feel again like everyone on the street is angry and frustrated towards you for stupid stuff that you're projecting, that you're thinking as if you're the center of the world, the typical sort of thing in paranoia where it seems as if everyone is just angry at you somehow that is a thing to do. And then on other days, again, like if you're feeling like really sexually attractive that day, it'll seem as if everyone's looking at you, everyone's sort of paying attention to you in a good way. So the projection will sort of obviously tend to come from wherever it's coming within you in some way. And so when I was feeling all this emotion, I noticed that all the projection I was putting onto people was kind of like the emotions. I would feel as if people were sort of trying to come and get me. So it was like a fear sort of paranoia. But it was a fear paranoia that was so clearly indistinguishable from my own personal sense of emotions coming towards me that they were like soap bubbles kind of bursting the second they reached. It was so clearly not a real threat that it made me see the projection for what it was, kind of thing. You could see that I got the sense that a certain person on the street was sort of trying to come towards me. And I don't mean this in terms of like people trying to come and attack me or anything. It was just the pure social anxiety thing of, oh no, this person is going to want to ask me for directions or come and talk to me for some random reason, like just the pure kind of social anxiety desire of like, I don't want to be approached and talked to, and yet I get the sense that everyone is kind of right here open for approaching. So that's the other thing that gives it sometimes this mix between fear and non-fear. It's a fear projection, but it's also a projection that basically involves people kind of gladly wanting to come towards you. So the thing is then that because there somehow, for whatever reason, I'm in a place in my life now where I'm less stressed, the boundary for that projection was sort of so subtle that I didn't really care if people came up and talked to me, I was open to it somehow. I didn't. A part of me didn't want it, but I was. It was okay. It wasn't like a huge deal, which meant that I wasn't super defensive or protective about it. So what that created is that, yeah, I was like, sure, okay. It seems as if this person is wanting to come and talk to me. I won't do anything about it. And then they approached me, and they passed away. I was like, okay, they didn't want to talk to me. So it became very clear all the time, again, like bubbles sort of coming and bursting, that it seemed as if what was coming towards me was the person, but what was actually coming towards me was the emotion. And the emotion partly had to do, right, with me realizing for myself that it was no big deal if someone came up and approached me. Right? It was, so the emotion had to do with the projection, but what was being felt was the emotion. It's a weird sort of loop, because the person represented an emotion, and the person's movement through space represented the emotion coming closer to me, as in my consciousness. So that's really weird, because then, so the person represented like an emotion, they approached me, and as they approached me, the emotion grew, because it was the emotion of encountering a person. The person was symbolizing the emotion of encountering a person. I encountered the person, I allowed myself to encounter the person moved away, poof, and suddenly they weren't a container for my projections anymore. They just became a person, just a person. And I realized that the more this happened, the less the projections worked. It got into a point where, yeah, people just became people. They didn't become like, all sorts of people with all sorts of evil intentions or good intentions, or no, it just became people. And the things that were approaching me and all that remained just my kind of emotions. But disconnected in some way. I mean, but connected, not disconnected from people. Because after all these emotions that I was feeling, they're not just in me, they are the emotions that I feel towards the world and people and interaction with other people. So again, that's the funny thing, because that means that there is obviously a component of this that doesn't have anything to do with projection, but is absolutely real. That is to say, we do interact with each other and read each other all the time, and if someone's approaching you, then that's not an incorrect reading. Someone is approaching you. They're not approaching you with the intention of actually talking to you, but they're approaching you because you're in their way. You're on the same street, sort of thing. There is a sort of boundary, I think, between paranoia and communication, let's say, correct? Sort of a fluid communication between people, even if it's at a purely kind of body language, non-verbal way. There is a sort of boundary between these things. Anyway, yeah, that's sort of something that's been happening, and it generates a strange after effect, which is, so clearly the lesson that I'm learning recently is about feeling your emotions, really allowing yourself to feel them. And it's proving to be a very strange lesson, because I'm realizing how many assumptions I have about this topic that come from my culture. Like, they're sort of strangely capitalist assumptions. I have this assumption that emotions are like products that you consume, you know, and that somehow what is good for me is to consume a lot of products. So what is good for me is to consume a lot of emotions. Even in terms of like mental health, emotional health, I have the sense that what I need to do to get emotional health is to allow myself to feel a lot of emotions. Consume all these little individual nuggets, these products. But you realize more and more that if you actually allow yourself to feel your emotions, and by actually allowing yourself to feel emotions, I mean, you know, really just being with whatever is, which, again, to be honest, the only definition I can find for that is meditation, really, just meditation. I don't think meditation is, like, the only way of doing this, but it's you know, it's the example I'm going to run with, because I think you can enter into meditative, you can enter into a meditative practice in other ways. Let's say through playing music or reading, again, social interaction, whatever. There are all sorts of ways in which people can have a practice like this. But anyway, who cares? I'm talking about meditation. So through meditation, and in this case, it's not even just meditation, because I just started meditating again. I hadn't meditated for maybe 2 years or something. I don't know how long, but I hadn't meditated for a while. And I started meditating again, but for whatever, like a week ago. So it's not that big of, like, clearly something else has changed. It's all sorts of life experiences and uh, whatever, right? There's all sorts of things that have gotten me to a point where I'm sort of feeling my emotions more than I used to. But meditation is a good example of that, because you're literally just sitting with your emotions. But what it's teaching me, this whole process, is that sitting with your emotions is like a single process in some weird way. Your emotions are all one thing, you could say. They are an enormous sort of experience that you're having right now in the present moment. And sometimes there will be things that you will think, this is distracting me from my emotions, or whatever. But what's distracting you from feeling your emotions is also an emotion somehow. Like, if imagine you're trying to it's hard to know how to talk about this, because I don't think it's that frivolous, but there's something to this. You're sort of trying to feel whatever it is that you're feeling, but something keeps distracting you. Some sort of noise makes you angry. You're like, this noise is making me angry and not allowing me to feel my emotions. There's some truth to that, but at the same time, the anger that you're feeling towards the noise is anger. It's an emotion. It's one of your emotions. It's something you're feeling. In a sense, it's a complete field. You're feeling whatever it is you're feeling now, plus the anger. That thing plus the anger altogether is whatever it is that you're feeling now. So whatever it is you're feeling now is whatever it is that you're feeling now. It's always whatever it is that you're feeling now. And that's what you learn through meditation. You realize, whatever it is that I'm feeling now is this. And you realize the mechanism through which you're trying to divide it all into chunks and be like, no, this is what I'm feeling, and this noise is just a distraction, or this noise is a good thing, and this is a bad thing. And again, like I said, that has its place, but it's also all one same thing. Not same thing, but it's yeah, it's all one same thing in terms of emotions. Uh, why do I say that it's that the rejection of the annoying noise has its place? I think it has its place. Hello? Move back. Sorry. I think it has its place because of a strange feedback loop. Sometimes your emotions, okay, this is the thing. It's because your emotions are not disconnected from your material life. And that means they're not disconnected from your will and your actions and your behavior and things of that nature. And again, just your material kind of structure. So what it means is that you're not just a passive observer. You're also an active participant. You're both things. You do both things at once. You know? And so you're not just a sort of pure seat of consciousness that's experiencing the annoying noises and all those things. You also choose. You choose to be close to this noise or not close to it. You choose to distance yourself from that or to get closer to it. You choose these things. You know? So you can say, I don't want to be close to this noise right now. And you go. And you go somewhere else. If you can. Right? If you can't, then you take steps towards being able to go. You work towards it. Individually, collectively, politically, whatever. Right? But you take steps. You choose things. And so that you're choosing things is also part of your emotions. It's part of the thing that you're feeling. So it's equally foolish to say, oh, this noise is part of my emotions and that's okay. You know, I'm just gonna I'm not going to divide it from anything and like I really feel, and it's another thing I've been feeling recently, and it's funny because literally it's coming in conjunction with me feeling my emotions, is me feeling my boundaries too, my material, to call it something, boundaries. And I mean material like in terms of a rigid sort of structure that's outside my control. So you could say that the unconscious is material as well, something like that. That the more you feel your emotions, the more you realize, oh, okay, I don't want to be here. I do want to be here. I don't want to do this. I do want to do this. And you can decide this precisely because you're feeling it. Because you're feeling whatever it is you're feeling, you can actually act on it. Usually, I'm realizing that usually because you don't feel whatever it is that you're feeling, that is to say, it's complicated though, isn't it? Because I gave that example that I think I really feel like because we live in a capitalist system, we get used to thinking of emotions as little products. And I said, I think there's something about that that's fallacious. At the same time, I feel that there's something completely true about that. And you can sort of twist it around. You could say that capitalism, for example, is like a... You could say capitalism is the fallacious representation of this individual parceling out process that happens somehow. That there are individual little parcels of information that get consumed and connect with other parcels of information to form bigger structure and things like that. There are sort of specific insights that connect into your interface and then change the whole interface. There are specific emotions that once you feel them, that was the emotion you needed to feel and not the other one, and it gets into Freudian stuff, obviously, right? Because, let's say, there will be emotional content that you will repress and other emotional content that you won't repress. There will be emotional content that you'll be, all sorts of emotions that you're feeling towards your mother or whatever, right? You will be like, oh, I don't want to feel that. And you will take all sorts of mechanisms to not feel it. You will overeat, you'll overdrink, or whatever it is. You will indulge in some sort of thing. Enter into all sorts of habits that allow you to completely repress that sort of stuff. And so you can say, okay, that is truly a parcel of information. It's not just an enormous field of information, it's a parcel that is wanting to be integrated. It goes hand in hand with the other stuff, because I realized that in order to integrate it, you need to somehow allow it to rest within the field. Because the mechanism of repression that you're using depends somehow on you not believing that there is such a thing as a full field of experience. Or in other words, that we're all one, and stuff of that sort. But at the same time, if you somehow convince yourself that we're all one and that therefore individual parcels of information are just illusory and not true, then you miss the point completely as well. Because you completely miss the existence of the other. Or something like that. So, it's funny, this is something I was thinking about recently, that these mother issues, the Freudian idea of mother issues, I think it relates to stuff Jung speaks about regarding the anima. But I'm going to give my own interpretation of this. I haven't really read that much of Jung speaking about the anima. I've read a few segments of him. But I suppose Jung, that's the thing. So probably what I'm going to say is stuff that Jung already says. I don't know. But I feel as if Jung, when he's pointing to the concept of the anima, he's pointing towards it's a symbol that represents emotions, is the sense that I get of it. So, for example, for the male ego, for the masculine ego, let's say, somehow culturally, the anima has come to represent emotions. And so the ego does not want to be assaulted by the anima because the anima is the emotions. It's like what I was saying before. It's the emotions are coming towards you and they're coming to either attack you or pleasure you or make you feel all sorts of things. They're going to make you feel emotions. They're going to be painful emotions and they're going to really kill you and attack you. Like Shiva or something like that, right? Or it's going to be like a sort of caring, embracing emotion that's going to envelop you. And it's the all sorts of mother archetypes of that sort. It's emotions. It's a figure, a human figure that represents the process by which the ego feels emotions. And if the ego really is avoiding feeling those emotions, those unconsciously held emotions, then those emotions are going to present itself to the ego as threatening things, someone coming to attack you. But also as incredibly, like, embracing things in some cases, right? What I mean is that even the embracing aspect of the anima can have like a toxic side to it. If you're just using that to distract yourself from other emotions, let's say. But it doesn't matter. Let's look at that later. So it's interesting that that also has like some sort of a material like aspect to it, in that this sort of an idea where the image of a woman would represent the harbinger of emotions is something that comes from a culture. It's a symbol system that is created from the collective minds of men identifying themselves strongly with masculinity, precisely in order to distance themselves from emotions. There's a weird kind of game gets played where suddenly, like, the symbol of a woman it means emotions. They're like little parcels of emotions, and the symbol of man represents consciousness. That's why that's why God is seen as a man, right? Jesus is seen as a man, right? All these sort of, it's so common in our world for the absolute epitome of consciousness, the absolute epitome of ego, to be represented with a male figure in religion. Uh, so that's a strange sort of situation we got ourselves into, right? Because it's a whole symbol set of enormous, like, archetypal proportions being replicated again at a material level, like, through the whole world, through the whole, like, structures that we live in, but embodying, like, concepts that we use in our daily lives. So, like, we say, I'm a man, I'm a woman, and these concepts have become, like, charged by our culture with enormous, like, sort of weird other sort of non-human meanings. A person isn't a parcel of emotions, and a person isn't an ego. You know, a person isn't a conscious thing, and a person isn't an unconscious thing. So we've created a world where certain people represent consciousness, and certain people represent the unconscious emotions, unconsciousness. So that's strange. Yeah. And so anyway, there are specific emotions that you need to feel, I think, specific parcels. And in order to feel those parcels, you need to make choices. And maybe one of the choices you need to make is, I need to get away from that noise. You know what I mean? Maybe the choice you need to make is, I need to stay here with this noise and embrace it. Who knows? All sorts of choices could be made. And those choices are part and parcel of the emotion process. consciousness, right, is part and parcel of the emotion process. They're not separate fundamentally. And they're most certainly not divided into people. They're not divided into, like, women are this and men are this. So, right, everyone has an ego. Everyone has consciousness and everyone has emotions. No one represents emotions. No one represents consciousness. But culturally, we act as if that is the case, I think. Because we've repressed all this stuff, basically. And anyway, so yeah, you need to make choices, and you can make easier choices when you're aware of your emotions. When you're aware of them, you're like, oh, okay. That's, I think, what I was saying before. That's where I kind of went off the rails for the first time, is by knowing what it is you're feeling, you realize the stuff you'd been hiding and all the decisions you'd been taking were based on that stuff that you were hiding. So that's where the parcels of information thing comes in play. That there were specific meanings, specific sets of information. See, and that's why synchronicity sometimes has to do with, like, big insights of meaning, because there are, like, specific instances of meaning that you're completely ignoring, and then you will base your whole life and your behavior on this ignored meaning, and you will be like, oh, I'm going to I'm going to act this way. And the only reason you're acting this way is because you're not actually aware of what it is you're feeling. You become aware of it, and suddenly you're like, oh, no, this doesn't make sense. And it has to do with boundaries, I think. Like I said, I think it's becoming more aware of your boundaries, because precisely if you're ignoring an emotion, if there's something that you don't want to feel, and what you do is distance yourself from it emotionally. If you only emotionally distance yourself from it, it means that you're materially not distancing yourself from it. You're not distancing yourself from it materially, right? That's the whole point. If you're stuck in a situation that you don't like, and you desensitize yourself to that situation, like, okay, I'm just not going to feel this. This stuff I don't want to feel, I'm just not going to feel it. The direct sort of parallel to that is that you're not distancing yourself materially from that. So what that means is that the more you resensitize yourself to that emotion, the more you allow yourself to feel things, it has consequences. It has direct consequences materially in your life. That's why. And see, maybe, again, this is what I was trying to point at when I said that capitalism gets us used to seeing things as products, and that confuses us somehow. Because, sure, we are talking about specific parcels of information, like, I've repressed this specific experience. I've repressed this specific aspect of my relationship with this person. I'm trying not to feel it. Specific things. But you don't just consume them as products and gain emotional health. Because that assumes that this process is only operating on the emotional level. You consume an emotion, you gain an emotional health. No. You consume an emotion, you gain a balance, emotional and material health. And that freaks us out because we're not expecting it. We're only expecting to gain emotional health because that's what we're trained to socially by purchasing dynamics. Because you think, okay, I'm going to feel this emotion. I'm going to feel much better. And that's it. And then I'm just going to, yeah, sure, it's going to have material effects because I'm just going to feel better and healthier and I'm going to go out and live my life. Thing is that, how do I say it? That kind of assumes that it's so 100% conscious or something. It doesn't take into account the reality of the unconscious, basically, as a material thing. When you feel an emotion, it completely reshifts how you exist in the material world. It completely reshifts it. It has nothing to do with your consciousness. You barely even get to choose it, even though it has to do with your choice. That's to say, it has to do with you having, like, you having chosen to remain silent for so long was due to you having repressed the emotion. When that emotion is less and less repressed, your ability to remain silent becomes, hindered. You're not able to anymore. And I think what freaks us out about that as well is that you realize there is an aspect of your will that is outside of your control. And that is partly the relationship with the unconscious. And I think that is partly the whole process of individuation, is realizing that whatever it is that I want and I don't want has deeper roots, or it extends into deeper areas of will that I am usually accustomed to identifying with. Right? Because you start feeling, for example, oh, this situation that I desensitized myself to, I'm like feeling it again, and then once I feel it, it becomes so obvious that I don't want this. I don't want this. No. Big boundary. And you're like, okay, I'm going to act, in response to this. I'm going to be like, okay, well, I'm not going to choose this thing anymore. I'm not going to do this thing anymore. I'm not going to do this, blah, blah, blah. And this choice, this will of you deciding to not do that is not 100% coming from the same place that you used to come from. Obviously, in a sense, right? Because before you were coming from a fairly sort of shallow place. Because if your will had come from deeper down, that's where all the repressed emotions were. You didn't want to touch that. So what's happening is that with the deepening of your emotional feeling, you also deepen your will. And it means that suddenly you want stuff that is not what you wanted before. And that reshifts your personality, right? Individuation. You're not who you were before. Who you were before was a whole series of emotions and choices that were operating at this level. Suddenly they're operating at this level or at some other level. It's like, what the, this is it doesn't 100% have to do with me anymore. Anyway. So I think that's important. The boundaries stuff becomes inevitable, and you realize that it's you who's choosing it. So it's not inevitable like in a determinist sense of, oh, I've lost control of my own will. No, it's inevitable in the sense that you're choosing it, and yet you know that this is not really a choice that you can not make. Because you're feeling these emotions. You could only trick yourself that it was a choice that you could not make if you weren't feeling that. If you weren't feeling that, you're like, who cares? I can do this, I can do that. When you're feeling it, suddenly it deepens. The will, it really is like, the metaphor, I think, is that, of like deeper roots of a tree. The will just has deeper roots that no longer allow for choice so much. That's funny. It's like it's freer will. It's like an even freer will than you could ever imagine, but it is deeper, which means that you can't actually choose as much as you thought. Partly this also has to do with ethical action, because you start realizing that your will and this deeper root of the will comes from a place that takes into account all other things. And so there is no longer the possibility of you saying, I'm going to choose to do this thing that hurts this person really badly. Or maybe you can, depending on the circumstance. I'm not sure. I think it's not really about that. It's not really about a code of conduct. But about a consciousness that extends your individual ego, and that has to do with the entire sort of environment that you're in. Kind of getting confused talking about it, but that's more or less it, I think. So that's the scary thing. When you start feeling your emotions, you start feeling that suddenly there are ways there are ways in which you have to act that you just can't avoid acting in. And you're like, okay, like I'm at the mercy of something that is not myself, and yet that is deeper than myself. It's deeper than myself. It's more myself than I ever thought, you know.